All right, there we go. So welcome to the Sustainable Living series. This series comes about from a partnership with the Land Stewards, the Master Gardeners, and Jackson Soil and Water Conservation. And you can collect them all and take a variety of different paths or different classes. This is kind of a cross between Master Gardeners and a Land Steward. It's supposed to be more of like an urban, helping you be more sustainable on your urban land. And at the end of the presentation, Kristina has an action list, some action items for us. So how the personal action list works, at the end, we will suggest a couple of items that have been added onto this master sustainable living action list. And you can use this QR code to access it. And I will also put the link in the chat to the document, the living document. And you can see action items from past sessions. And you also see the links to past recordings for our Sustainable Living series. My name is Nicole Smith, and if you we're expecting Rachel. Rachel's last day was today. We bid her farewell as she heads off to work with the Native Plant Society. So if you want to work with Rachel, she is off doing native plant stuff. So more wonderful stewarding items. She won't be gone. She'll still be a part of the community. I am the education program assistant for the Land Steward program and will be bridging the gap while a new coordinator is hired. So if you have questions or class ideas, you are welcome to email me. Sorry, the tiny human is being a little loud. And I also want to share some upcoming classes. As you can see here on the picture to the right, you can subscribe and we won't spam you. This gives you access to the MailChimp where we send out upcoming classes and our newsletter. So what is coming up in the Land Steward program world? Well, Kristina has a tour on the 14th. There's still space for you to register for the in-person garden tour. Why not round out your virtual experience with an in-person tour? It's always fabulous. We have agroforestry, forest farming, and native forest crops on October 12th. And I'm forgetting who's presenting that one, but I do know Rachel is returning on October 23rd to present fire-reluctant native plants for fire-wise landscaping. So those are upcoming programs. You can find these by going on OSU's extension Land Steward program. So if you just type into Google Land Steward programs, OSU events, these will pop up. And I want to thank Kristina, who is here today with us. Let me just close my chat window so I can see our whole page here, Kristina, with a wonderful presentation of changing the world one native pollinator at a time. Kristina is passionate about growing, sharing, and planting the native annuals, perennials, shrubs, and trees that create the habitats that best support our region's native pollinators, and thus all creatures that depend upon them. She's honored to serve as president and volunteer director of the Pollinator Project in Rogue Valley, a growing nonprofit based in Phoenix, Oregon. Kristina earned her Master Gardener certificate in 2016. Wonderful. Thank you, Kristina, for joining us. And let's see, did I have one more slide? Oh, nope, that was it. So I'm going to stop sharing now and hand it over to Kristina.
Thank you very much, Nicole. And thank you very much, everyone, for joining. I'm excited. This is the first time I've done a Zoom presentation in a while. And I think it might be my second with the Land Stewards. And it's always such an honor to be part of the group. I was wondering what was happening with Rachel. I saw in her email that it was her last day. So sad, but I'm so glad that she's going to still be around. She's such an important person. Yeah. So that's really great. I wanted to also say hello to a couple people. I know Consuelo and I know Gwen, and I haven't met many of the others. At least I don't think so based on your names. And yeah, it'd be great to have you, any of you, come to the tour on Saturday. I think you said 11 people had signed up as of now. Okay, cool. So I think everybody can see my screen, right?
Yes, that looks
Oh,
great.
okay, good. Perfect. So thanks again for the opportunity. We've talked about native plants a little bit already, and this presentation is called Changing the World, One Native Pollinator Garden at a Time. I'll tell you a little bit more about the pretty picture you're looking at in just a second. And this is the same flyer, just so that you had some context. I should have known Nicole would show it. And I thought, well, maybe I'll tell you a little bit about myself. I don't usually go into this kind of details. But thank you very much for putting the sustainable series together. I think it's a great idea to expand the land steward, so it's also really encompassing, excuse me, the urban situation. The land stewards are just so important for this region. We have such big tracts of land, and with Rachel's work to get people to think about this greater ecosystem on a wide scale is awesome. But then we have also the smaller areas in the valley, smaller land lots that can really make a difference as well to connect to that larger landscape. So thanks so much for having me talk about this. My husband went through the Land Steward, an early version back in 2017. And at the time we had a half acre of land. So it was, small for us, but he found it very informative and a great way to meet a lot of great folks. Dave and I moved here from Georgia in 2012. Atlanta, Georgia, a very different life, a different lifestyle. And it always hurt my heart there to see how little nature was cared for in any way. And, even in suburbs, the nature was often the loser in this situation. So when I moved out here, I was already aware of the plight of the pollinators, but I wasn't really focused on the natives. It was like, okay, you have a honeybee and a bumblebee and a ladybug, and life is good. So I became involved in Pollinator Project Rogue Valley for a number of reasons. And at the time, the focus was more or less on the honeybees. And with time and more information and getting into this new environment, I realized that we need to have more information out there about our native pollinators, especially here in this amazing ecosystem in Southern Oregon. And, what can we as residents do? So this is why we're talking about this today. And I just want to say I do have non-natives in my yard, so it's not like you have to be 100%. But I think as we all become more aware and more focused on this, then we can change our lives and the world. So I hope you enjoy this conversation, and I hope to see some of you on Saturday. So this is Pollinator Project Rogue Valley. This is a picture of the garden from 2023 when I got lucky on that day. We are a 501c3 nonprofit, and our vision is communities and landscapes working together, supporting diverse ecosystems rich with native plants and thriving pollinators, native pollinators. We have a number of programs. Habitat Academy is adult education. Pollinator Pals we're focusing on getting into schools and working with community organizations for youth. And From Fire to Flowers, Pollinator Gardens, working on helping people recovering from the fire put in native pollinator gardens. And then we have a demonstration garden, and a small nursery on the side. So we call that our growing gardens. And then we have a Rogue Buzzway, a map you can self-certify. So we are at 312 North Main, Suite B in Phoenix, right there on Main Street, trying to be right in the public eye, so to speak, to show them what you can have that almost looks like the wildlands. So this is us at work. A few pictures just to show you. We have Pollinator Pals. This is Ethan, our education coordinator. This was from the farm tour in July. And then this was him at Bellevue School. And then this is our From Fire to Flowers. It went from this to this in about 3 months, I think. And then this is Habitat Academy. This was last year up on Mount Ashland, David Lee Myers. And we did a butterfly walk, so he has a butterfly in his hands. And then this is a recent picture just a couple of days ago. This is Ju Parker, and this is Myra. Myra's a volunteer, and Ju is our nursery manager. And I just want to say thank you to Southern Oregon Subaru for their sponsorship of our garden program. And this is the agenda, I guess you would say, for today's conversation. Feel free to put chat questions or comments so that we can gather them for later. This is mostly what the agenda is. We're going to start off with the bad stuff and then start talking about what we can do for the pollinators and the native ecosystem that I think will help all of us. And then why pollinators, the solutions, resources, and Q&A. So here's a question for you. Does anybody know either the flower or the insect? And they're both native. I'll give you a hint. And if you want to put it in the chat, great. If not, that's fine. All right, I'll take that as not quite sure. I'll give you the answer later. So you have to stay for a little bit to see the answer. So we're going to start off asking the question first, what is an insect? So probably most of you remember this from biology. The most successful group of animals, maybe there's 10 million species, which seems like a heck of a lot. 3/4 of all the animal species would be an insect. And when I was researching this, I wanted to update this slide. So I thought, well, how many species depend on insects? So according to Google Land, insects feed about 6,000 species of birds, 350 species of mammals, including 2,000 species approximately that are eaten by humans around the globe. So insects are actually pretty important. And as you can imagine, most fish species do eat insects. The little chart on the right here is showing you approximately how many species there are worldwide. This is not number of ants. This is number of species. So you have 10,000 species of ants. And then did you know that we have 20,000 species of bees in the world and about 700 species in Oregon? Moths, 160, flies, 110. So those are the ones that are in dark red are major pollinators. But notice that beetles, there's 400,000 species of beetles. That's a lot of species of beetles. The windshield test, probably you've heard of this before. I don't know how old everybody is because I can't see your picture. But if you're like me, then you probably remember the picture on the top left. Sorry, I'm dyslexic. Top right, where there's lots of bugs. And then on the bottom left, you don't see anything, which is what most of us see. If you imagine maybe behind all the bug splatters, that might be an agricultural scene out in the country, which is probably what it should look like. But now, because we have so many highways, and why would there not be any insects there? Well, you've got a lot of conifers. You have a lot of grass that's mowed, probably sprayed. I mean, admit it, I don't really want, to have to deal with weeds and lots of insects when I travel at 70 miles an hour. But then how many miles and miles of freeways are there across the country? And what difference does that make for the insects? And what about other things? So you have this list here. You have non-native species that have come into this country. You have non-native plants, You have non-native insects that are impacting our native species of plants and insects. Food deserts, also known as a lawn, but there's other food deserts as well. Habitat is disappearing. We're doing a lot more development just here in the Rogue Valley. For those of you that have lived here a while, I'm sure it's a pretty different place. Commercial agriculture, we don't have what like the Willamette or, God forbid, the Midwest. We don't have those, but we do have agriculture. Thank goodness most of ours are organic and small farms. Pesticides, which would include herbicides, insecticides, and fungicides, can do damage from small urban areas to the, Jackson County vector control, to the highways, to just, businesses using herbicides. Light pollution really impacts moth pollination. It's a thing. And then mosquito zappers. If you look that up, how many insects are killed that are not mosquitoes, it's pretty sickening, actually. Then there's a couple other things that I wanted to add. Fire. I probably don't need to talk about that too much. The phenology is changing, so plants can bloom at different times than when the insects come out, or, where's the flower that I'm supposed to be eating? Oh, well, it already has gone to seed because it got too hot too quick. Climate change, I haven't really ever talked about this number 10 before, because it was like, well, I don't know what to do about it, but it's getting so scary that I wanted to tell you. I've been started to read about how climate change, the heat, mostly the heat, extreme heats are impacting bees. This is a recent study, and it's called Bee Populations at Risk of 1-2 punch from heat waves, and including because if they have infections from pathogens. So for a solitary bee, it can represent a quarter of the total time, a couple of days, they are active outside their nests and in their lifespan. And then that can severely affect their fitness for mating, pollinating, and producing offspring. And it seems like there's a lot, to me anyway, there seems like there's less pollinators this year than there were the year before. And it might be because of this. Oh, I wanted to ask you, what else? Is there another reason that you can think of that we're having, what other challenges? Do you have another one? If you want to put it in the chat. I actually gave you the answer because I forgot to ask you the question. So the next one I wanted to tell you, which is not really on many people's list, is I don't know why or how pollinators are important, and I probably don't care. So I think that's a big one, and I'm hoping that this will help today to help you so you understand a little bit more why pollinators are important and what we can do about it. So this is where PPRV started. We moved into this building in Phoenix in April, or actually February 2019. And then this is a photo from April 2019 from Google. Thank you, Google. This is us. And that's what it looked like. Not extremely pollinator friendly. And I thought about how I could connect this to what we were just talking about. So I say that this picture has challenges 1, 2, 3, 5, and 11. And what are those challenges? Non-native species, food deserts, disappearing habitat, and pesticides. I don't think it has the others. It does have climate change, but that was, a while ago. So if you look at that, you've got non-native plants. I know they're spraying. You can see it that they're spraying. They don't know. They don't care. So the two plant species that are predominant in that landscape are the golden euonymus and the heavenly bamboo nandina, which are extremely pervasive as you look around the landscape. Not native to here. They are native somewhere, obviously. They are really great plants to the landscape because they don't need much water. They're pretty indestructible. I call them plastic plants. They do nothing for our pollinators. Maybe in the spring, honeybees enjoy the flowers. Nothing eats it. So they're not a host plant to any butterfly or moth species here. In some parts of the country, the berries of the nandina are toxic to cedar waxwings. But then on the other, I was reading an article and they were saying, well, then nobody eats them. Because they're always there. So the birds don't eat them. Well, that's a problem too. So by May of 2021, this is what the garden looked like. This was obviously during COVID. So yeah, we made a big dent in this during the COVID time. And so at this point, there were 31 native species in the garden growing here. And I've circled the two major non-natives. This is a mugo pine, and then there's a rosemary here, and then there's this big tree that didn't get burned. As you can see right here, I forgot about that. This was so obvious. So the fire came through. Actually, let me go back for a second. I don't usually think about this. So here you can see how big these trees are. And this is what it looked like. These are, I'm not sure what that is. And then here, there's nothing there. So the fire came underneath through the fence, burned all those out, which was fine with me. But then the trees are really pretty much majorly damaged there. So there's a rosemary and then the mugo pine. And then this is in 2023, and we're up to 51 species. The mugo pine is gone. The birds did like it, but I really am trying to get another shrub there. And by then we had updated our garden guide with 51 native species, although the buckbrush Ceanothus cuneatus did die, so I've got to do something about that one. But that's kind of what it looked like there. And this is May of 2023. There's that photo that we've seen, different angles. And then this is in 2024. This is May, but you can see actually that some of the things had already bloomed. Maybe this was later in May. So there aren't as many flowers, and it could probably use a little bit of trim, a little bit wild looking, I suppose. 52 perennial species, 8 annual species. And I can guarantee you that these pollinators are there because of the plants we planted, because I took these photos and they would not have been there because the plants weren't there. I think this is a leafcutter bee nesting in a crevice in the sidewalk. This is a gray hair streak butterfly, a caterpillar, probably a straw moth. There's another word to go with that species. And this is on tarweed. This is a hoverfly on the Rocky Mountain bee plant. These are 2 native bees on the Grindelia nana Idaho gumweed. And then this is a big Nevada bumblebee. I mean, she must be about that big. And it's a bad picture because I got lucky that I got her on a Clarkia. This is up against that fence. So why do we care? Why would we need to know about all of this? Well, it actually helps us a lot. 90% of all flowering plant species require pollination, either from a mammal or a bird or insect. In some parts of the world, like a lemur can be a pollinator of certain foods. We don't have them here. And so even if you are a meat eater, you appreciate pollination because healthy cows eat alfalfa, and it's not a native leafcutter bee, but it, or excuse me, not a native alfalfa bee, but it is being pollinated by an alfalfa bee. And so you have meat and milk because of that alfalfa bee. Most fruit and veggies, you probably know about that. You also eat seeds. The seeds provide food for birds as well as people. This is tarweed. This is what it looks like with the seed heads, with the seeds in it, in the seed head, and this is what the flower looked like. Tarweed is a food of the original peoples. This is a high protein seed that they would dry or do dry and put in like pemmican. So it's a people food, a bird food. The native bees love this flower. So pollination is necessary for seed and fruit production. This is an apple. This is a mason bee on an apple blossom. So you got to have these 2 things to get this. And it's mind-boggling to think that these relationships have been evolving over 170 million years. You know, this didn't just happen yesterday. So what is pollination? I'm sure you all remember this also from biology. Pollination is the transfer of pollen from the anther, which people often refer to as the male part of the plant, to the female or the stigma. And I'm actually going to take those two words out because I have been reading a little bit about how this is not necessarily accurate. Mammals usually have a male and a female, but even that can be debatable. But you can't necessarily say that all plants have male parts or female parts. So really this should say the pollen producing part of the plant, which is the anther, and the pollen receiving part of the plant. So it is reproduction. Just like any organism, you almost always have to have a male and a female. The male gamete hits the female, and then that makes, you know, offspring of some sort. So in this case, it's a seed. The seed gets fertilized here, and it turns into a fruit or a seed that gets dried. So this is a picture of a portulaca really close up, and it's very easy to see the pollen grains there on the anthers. And then you've got a little bit of grain up here, a little bit of pollen grain up here that's going to go down into the style and pollinate the seed. And this is a bumblebee that's doing the service for us. Pollinators make good things happen. We live in an amazing, diverse area, and with so many such a diversity of plants, you have to have a diversity of insects and birds and wildlife to keep it all together. So this is an Oregon grape with the big carpenter bee there. Maybe it's a bumblebee. And this is a black wasp on a flower that I'm not sure, and a chickadee with a wasp, with a caterpillar. So flowering trees and shrubs that are pollinated are helping us keep our soil on the mountains and the waters clean, our air sequesters carbon, helps have those beautiful wildflowers in the spring, and the aforementioned food for birds. This is a statistic about the 30% decline of bird populations since the 1970s. I have not been able to find if that's gone up or down. I haven't found a more recent updated number. It's pretty bad. I doubt it's gotten any better, to be honest with you. And one of the reasons I would propose is because there are fewer native plants, and native plants are what caterpillars eat before they turn into butterflies and moths. And so if you don't have baby food, which is what birds eat, if you have no baby food, then you have no birds. And if you haven't read The Nature of Oaks by Dr. Doug Tallamy, I would recommend it. Oaks are a keystone species for caterpillars, moths, butterflies, and so many other creatures. I'll talk about that again in a minute. And so who are the pollinators? And of course, most people think of the European honeybee, which is very natural. That's what we hear about in the media. We love the honey. It's the only bee in North America that produces honey. It is not native. Came to this country with the settlers in the 15 or 1600s. This is a fully social bee, meaning there's always bees around. They have a queen, and she always has daughters and babies, sisters. She can lay up to 2,000 eggs a day, or 200,000 eggs in a year. They live in a hive. They are not dormant in winter. They stay alive. The hive stays alive. And I'll talk about that in a second. And like I said, the only bee in North America that produces honey. But there's more than one bee. So there was, this was a presentation that I saw, and Jim Kane, who is an entomologist from USDA, said that every 100 honeybee hives has the capacity to remove pollen and nectar from the landscape that would feed 10 million native bees. And one of the reasons that is a fact, on the assumption that he knows what he's talking about, is because of this life cycle. If you can lay 2,000 eggs in a day and your hive never dies, then you are going to make an impact. This is a poster we have in our shop. It's 24 by 36. This is just an excerpt out of it. And this is showing you some of the diverse species of native bees in this country. These are all different than the honeybee. They all have different life cycles, similar life cycles, but very different than the honeybee. 20,000 species worldwide. I mentioned that before, about 4,000 in North America, 700,000 in Oregon. And these insects are essential pollinators. Most all of these are exceptions. The bumblebee is an exception. Live their adult life about 6 weeks. And the female lays about 30 eggs in her lifetime. She is solitary, not social, meaning she never sees her babies. She doesn't have friends. And some of them don't fly very far. A mason bee, for instance, which are spring bees, they might fly 200 feet. You might be getting the idea of what the problem is. And there are studies that have shown that honeybees in the landscape can impact our native bees. And one of the reasons is because there's never enough flowers. So if you don't have enough to eat, then the dominant species tends to take over. So butterflies and moths. There are 2 species of butterflies, the well-known monarch and the beautiful swallowtail. And this is a monarch caterpillar on milkweed. Most everybody knows about this combination, but the swallowtail caterpillar can eat maybe 5 species of plants, but that's about it. And then there's many Lepidoptera that can only, in the caterpillar stage, can only eat 1 plant or 2 species. So that's why we need to have host plants, and people understand the monarch and milkweed by now. But there's others that are like that. So that's why native plants are so important. And so I have a little bit of a quiz for you here. In North America, there are 775 of something and almost 11,000 of something else. That's a 7-to-1 ratio. And if you think about it, it's not butterflies that have the bigger number. There are almost 11,000 species of moths in North America, but we don't see them because most of them fly at night. Most of them look like this little nondescript moth here. And some of them, we get lucky enough and we see a white-lined sphinx moth in our garden in the afternoon or maybe early morning. Long proboscis is almost like a hummingbird. I took this picture, I don't know, 4 years ago in my garden. And so this is just showing you that caterpillars are one part of the life cycle, and they eat plants. And the butterfly or the moth is the adult, and they will eat nectar. But some adults don't eat. Their purpose in life is to mate, and they live, I don't know, 3 days, 4 days, and then they are gone. And hopefully they have laid enough eggs in that short period of time. I wanted to show you that there is relatively recent research that moths might be as important as bees for some pollination, like fruit trees. There is a man in the northeast part of the country. He did a study and found out that moths that are pollinating at night, when most people aren't up, are actually doing a huge job for the major pollination service in those orchards. And what's so funny is some of those moth caterpillars are actually pests to the crop tree in some way. So it's interesting to think about that life cycle. Flies, there are flies that pollinate and actually important. The hoverfly or the syrphid fly or the flower fly is actually probably second after bees, but maybe it's going to be third now that the moths are coming out to be so important. So this is a hoverfly. Often they're yellow and black. Often they'll come on your skin. I've had taken pictures of them on my arm when I'm sweaty, and they're not going to sting you. They don't even have a stinger. You can tell that it's a fly because these little short antennae here, the legs are really, really skinny. There's only 2 wings, not that you would notice that. There's no hair. This creature is not going to sting you. It does not have the capacity. It is a good pollinator. If you grow white sweet alyssum in your garden, they really like that. And then this is the larva of the hoverfly, and this is an aphid. So this is a little squiggly worm. It's not a caterpillar, so it's not it doesn't, hump like the whichever caterpillar that is. These are really hard to see, but they will eat aphids. So you get double duty with the hoverfly. The tachinid fly, this is not a house fly. If you look really closely, it's got pokey hairs on it, and it will eat nectar. So it is a pollinator, so it goes to the flower. This is its little icky looking larva, or maybe it's cute, depending, I don't know. If you're a monarch person, you don't like these because the tachinid fly will lay its eggs in caterpillars and often monarchs, and it's a parasitic relationship. And so the egg hatches in the monarch caterpillar, and it's kind of gross. But I think they're cute. I got a good picture of a tachinid fly on my arm just a couple of days ago. And this is a bee fly. This is super cute in your garden. It hovers like a little teeny hummingbird. The proboscis is always out. Notice that, again, the really skinny legs, 2 wings. It is hairy. And it must be picking up pollen like right here on its face because it never touches the flowers. And then we have the beetles. I mentioned earlier that there is a count of about 400,000 species worldwide of beetles. Not all of those are pollinators by any means, but the ones that I'm showing you here they're going to be pollinators. You have a longhorn flower beetle. I think these are really pretty. They can come in yellow and black, different colors, and they have long horns. The lady beetle, which I presume most of you have seen this. And if you've seen this and not known what it is, this is its larva. Please do not kill these. I did that once a long time ago, and I didn't know what it was because it's such a ugly looking creature, but it looked like it was going to bite me. But small. So it goes from the eggs, which I don't have a picture of. It goes from the egg to the larva to the pupa, and then this hatches. It splits its skin, and out comes the lady beetle. Both of these 2 stages will eat aphids, so they're good to have in the garden. And then this is a soldier beetle. This shows you what a terrible gardener I am. I took this picture on my cabbage, I think, a couple years ago. The soldier beetle will eat aphids in the adult stage and the larval stage. They look like fireflies. We do not have fireflies on the western part of the country, so I got the lady beetle and the soldier beetle in here. They will come in a little bit later in the summer, so welcome those beetles to your garden. Wasps, I really want to put in a good word for wasps. Most people connect wasps to yellow jackets, and I will say that yellow jackets can be problematic. However, if you can live with yellow jackets, I ask that you do. They provide a big service to you as a gardener, especially if you're a vegetable gardener. This is, I think I took this photo, 3 yellow jackets devouring the part of a grasshopper. Yes, I know towards the end of the summer, they get pretty bad, but if you can live with them, they're ground nesting wasps, generally speaking. Most other wasps won't mess with you. This is that black wasp. All they want to do is really look at the flowers. This is a sand wasp, I believe. I think it's beautiful. Thin-waisted wasp. I took this picture. I think I took this one too. They go to the flowers for the nectar. Generally speaking, they're eating insects or other ways that they get their protein. They tend to go to small flowers, flat, open flowers. Most of the time, like I said, they won't mess with you. And even the paper wasps, which hang up in the eaves, their nests hang in the eaves that look like yellow jackets, they won't mess with you either much. I've had a couple of experiences, so I think what I said is true. Hummingbirds, these are actually good pollinators. They visit hundreds of flowers every day because they have to keep their body going with all that nectar. And so their throat and their forehead touches a lot of pollen bearing parts of the flower. They also eat small insects, so gnats and mosquitoes, aphids. So these are really great guys to have around. Tubular flowers, but I've had people tell me they've seen them go to sunflowers too. So, and I put this picture in here because I just want you to know that if you have spider phobia, please leave your spiders, if for no other reason, so that hummingbirds can have nests. This is a picture of a nest, beautiful, that is made of spider silk, lichen, grasses, and more. So we need all the insect diversity that we can get. Someday I'll do a presentation about the pest control companies that come to your door. So if we hope to stem the losses of insect diversity and the services they provide, society must take steps at all levels to protect, restore, and enhance habitat for insects across landscapes from wildlands to farmlands and urban cores. That came from the Xerces Society. So this is an urban yard. So wouldn't it be wonderful if they all looked like that? Okay, here's our answer. This is Oregon sunshine, one of the best native plants for a yard, for a lawn area. And this is a native sweat bee, I believe. It's hard to know sometimes, but I think that's what that is that I took a picture of in our front garden there at the office. So what do pollinators need? If you want to grow for pollinators, if you want a garden, if you want a landscape for pollinators, what do you need? This is what you need, just like you as a person. You need food, you need a place to live, you need something to drink, and surely you do not want to be in a place with pesticides. So as we've talked about, the different pollinators eat different things, either pollen or nectar, or they might eat leaves, or they other parts of the plant. They might eat other insects. They might need minerals, such as a butterfly. This is a bunch of some kind of little tiny blue butterfly on some kind of bird poop in a wet area, trying to get those minerals. These are actually not being eaten. These are cuts by a leafcutter bee, and she uses those as habitat for her babies. She makes little nests. So 30% of the bees live in cavities, and she has little nests that she makes for each of her egg rolls, which is the egg, the pollen, and the nectar ball that she leaves, and she never sees her babies. They nest in the ground. This is a tumulus, so you have the nest down below. This is from our garden. We raised 50 American lady butterflies one year because they ate all of our 4-inch starts of pearly everlasting. That's what this is from. And there's caterpillars in that little webbing. This is another tachinid fly, bumblebee getting the pollen off of a poppy. It has no nectar. And then here's leaves that a butterfly or a beetle might live under. Native plants are food. So here's a teeny little caterpillar on a Bolanders phacelia from our garden. This is a sweat bee on a Bolander sunflower. Here's a caterpillar on coyote tobacco. These are the few blooming flowers still going. And this, I think I took this picture in December. There's no seeds left. The seeds have already gone away, I presume, eaten by birds. And then this, of course, is a sunflower, which most of you have already seen. So I mentioned the food. I don't know if we have enough time. So this goes until 7. What time? When does this go until? Sorry.
7:30.
Okay, great. We have plenty of time then. Okay, great. So I'm going to show this little video here. I mentioned the pearly everlasting and the caterpillars. I don't know if you're going to hear sound or not. There really isn't any sound except wind blowing and sound of plants. So you can see where the caterpillars are, you can see where they've been eating, you can see where they've been sleeping. You can see where they destroyed our crop. And then this is what we got. We got about 50 American lady butterflies that year. We released them over the course of maybe 3 weeks. Think of your garden as home. We have crevices and safe places. I mentioned the leaves already. Here is a chrysalis of an American lady butterfly that I just mentioned, about 1 inch long. You can't even see that when it's hanging there, especially when the plant is starting to die. This is a small carpenter bee nest that she made in a caneberry cane, like if you'd cut off your raspberry stalk, and then she was able to go in there and sort of pull out the pith and lay her eggs in there. Small carpenter bees, tiny black, almost looks like an ant, but skinnier somehow. Doesn't look like an ant, but that's what you might think of. Here's that tumulus I mentioned before. So this is the top side, and this is what you would see underneath. So she drills down. This is a ground nesting bee. And so she digs this out, and she's got her little side channels, and each little egg goes with the pollen and nectar ball. And she does as many of these as she can, maybe 30 in her lifetime. She dies, and then they will hatch the next year. So the native solitary bees often have a 365-day life cycle, but they're only as adults for 6 weeks. It's mind-boggling to think about that. This is a digger bee, and I thought I would just show this to you because this is not something that most people see. I got lucky to see this. This was on a bank, fairly good-sized bank, not hardly any mulch or anything on it, dry soil. And so what she's doing is she's digging her nest. And digger bees are not social, but they are, there's a word for it, which I can't remember. They will have neighbors. They like to aggregate together. So you can see here, you have several digger bees, but that's her nest. She doesn't go in Sally's nest, and Sally doesn't go in Debbie's nest. They know where they are, but they are next to each other. It was really cool to see. There were a lot. And I guess I should also say I don't really have this as a point, and I probably should add it, that most bees, they're not gonna sting you. They can't sting you. They don't have stingers. They weren't born that way. They weren't built that way because they have no hive to defend. Honeybees will sting you because if you mess with their baby food, which is what honey is, or you mess with their hive, then they have to defend it. But most native bees have no nest to defend, so they won't. And plus, they don't live long enough. And so they just have to do their business, which is to gather enough pollen and nectar for the baby. Bumblebee females will sting you if you mess with them, but you have to do a lot of messing with them to get them to sting you. Male bumblebees don't have a stinger. So it's really the honeybees, the female bumblebees, and maybe the female carpenter bee, the big black ones, who would really do the most stinging. And then everything else is wasps, yellow jackets primarily. So back to native. The native plants are pretty important because that's where we live. We live in Southern Oregon. We don't live in China. We don't live in Georgia. And so you're preserving the regional biological heritage here, our genetic diversity. Generally speaking, they will require less water. Not always true if you're trying to grow riparian plants like, chokecherry or red twig dogwood. They need the water because that's where they live. This is on Mount Ashland, right on the road. This is the road right here. As far as I know, no one planted that, and I would love to have a garden that looks like that. This is coyote mint. This is yarrow. This is sulfur flower buckwheat. There's there's a native grass in there. I can't quite tell, but this is up on Mount Ashland. It's a beautiful place to go and learn about the insects and the plants. If you haven't read Dr. Doug Tallamy and you haven't read The Nature of Oaks, I would strongly recommend bringing nature home. It's probably one reason I'm standing here talking to you. And he did a study with one of his grad students. He's an entomology professor from Delaware. And they did a study comparing the number of insects or the number of species, I guess, supported by a ginkgo versus a native oak in Delaware. And this is the number of species they found on the ginkgo and the native oak. And so his point is insect diversity decreases in landscapes with non-native plants that are greater than 70%, I think 60%. So you should be aiming for 60% native species, which is a tall order. Do the best you can. And hopefully your neighbor is planting native species too. So yeah, here, this is it. When you exceed 30% of the plant biomass in your yard as being woody non-natives, that's when the chickadee population becomes unsustainable, when birth rates don't equal death rates. So what you're looking for, according to him, is you want 70% of your yard of woody natives, like that aforementioned oak tree, ceanothus, red twig dogwood, serviceberry, nine bark, all those things. Oh, I forgot, this is a very important point. The reason is because a single pair of breeding chickadees requires 7,500 caterpillars to rear one clutch of young. One clutch of young is about 4 babies. It's a heck of a lot of caterpillars for 4 baby birds. So you obviously don't want to be using pesticides, the neonicotinoids. I want to focus on that because this is a pervasive, ubiquitous insecticide that people use. And this is actually harming pollinators. Neonicotinoids have been around for about 20 years. It's used on food crops. It's used all around the world. It's a systemic insecticide, which means when you use it, either as a spray or a drench around the plant, or even like injection on a tree, it becomes part of that plant. It expresses itself in the pollen and the nectar. It obviously is in the plant, so if a caterpillar eats it, neonicotinoids are doing a bad thing on pollinators and also on birds. There was a really, really sad story a number of years ago about how neonicotinoids are impacting the bird flight. So these are things that I have found. It's in hummingbird urine. It shortens the lifespan. It's in our food and water. Gordon Jones, a couple of years ago, when he was doing the pesticide stewardship partnership out of OSU, there were 2 years in a row that they were finding high traces of neonicotinoids in the Rogue Valley waters. Glyphosate, also known as Roundup, is a weed killer, so you wouldn't think it'd be bad for bees, but 70% of the bees nest in the ground. There was a study about how it disorients bees, honeybees, when they are flying. They can't find their hive, which could be pretty disastrous. And then it drifts, so it can go in a lot of places, and that's not even getting into people. So this is more information about the neonicotinoids. If you look at the bottle in the store, you will not see the word neonicotinoid, but you will see the word imidacloprid, and you will see some of these other words. The imidacloprid is the one that's the most common. The all-in-one rose of flower care label is even worse. I think that's the one that also has a fungicide in it. It's water soluble, so it will go through the soil, end up in the water. And did we mention that fish eat insects? So the caddisflies and the mayflies could be impacted as well. And I thought, if it's okay, I'm just going to mention this. We do have a Jackson County vector control that does spray for mosquitoes. They do tell you 12 hours before they do so. This is a map. One of the maps that they send you if you sign up to be on the notification list. This is pretty vague. I don't think they spray that whole spot, but they will spray within that zone. So you can see, generally they don't go into Ashland, but there have been times that they do. And then sometimes they go all the way up to Trail, but that's pretty rare. I took these pictures this summer. This is on one plant, one of my lavenders. See, I have non-natives. And these are sleeping bees. These are male bees. This is probably 7 o'clock, 7:30 on a warm summer night. This is bumblebee, 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 bumblebee. I think that's a bumblebee. And this is a male Van Dyke bee, I believe. They're the beautiful yellow ones. They look like teddy bears, I think. So these are sleeping bees. So not all bees go in hives at night, is the point, which is what vector control says is true. This products that they use, the one product they use, I all of a sudden lost what it's called, deltamethrin, is toxic to bees. It says it on the label. And fish. So you can get on the no spray list. You have to sign up every year. So think like a pollinator. You want to have layers in your landscape, tall, short grasses, perennials, annuals. You want flowers going from spring to fall. You want pollen, nectar, host plants. You want a place for them to overwinter, a place for them to sleep at night. You want to be connected to your neighbor and to that other neighbor. So you're really trying to think about an ecosystem, not just your one little yard. So if you want to design a garden for pollinators, these are some of the things that you would want to think about. Bloom time, host plants, habitat, water source, pesticide free, and maybe you want to raise monarchs. So this is a little cage that one of our volunteers built. So beautiful. And she's raised a lot of monarchs in her shady yard. They just come and land on her milkweed. Here is a brochure that Lynn Kuntzman, a master gardener, put together. We have this in our shop and you can find it on our resources page. Here's our the statistics there, and these are the genuses of some of the major plants that act as host plants. Actually, I think around the world that we have most all of these. We have species that would grow here. So just run through really quickly some of the ones. Maybe you're familiar with them, maybe you're not. These are not necessarily on this list, but these are great pollinator plants and they're great for this part of the country. So we have the beautiful red flowering currant, that aforementioned oak tree, vine maple, a ceanothus. Here are some perennials, sulfur flower buckwheat, California fuchsia, lupin, aster, poppies. They're ubiquitous and they're just such an important plant in both the spring and the fall, especially for the bumblebees and the small native bees. It's a huge source of pollen, no nectar. And the pollen is what the female bee needs, not only to help her be fat in the spring and in the fall when she goes to hibernate, but also to put in the nest for the babies. The lupin, beautiful butter lupin here, blue gilia, an annual, and then here's the tarweed. I was talking to Susie Savoy, Klamath native seeds the other day, and she said it's getting harder and harder to find tarweed in the wild places in the valley because everybody's either getting rid of them or they're building on top of them. We have a lot of tarweed at our place. Here are native grasses, also very important for pollinators, believe it or not, no flowers, but skipper butterflies use a number of the native bunch grasses as a host plant. Some of you might be familiar with Vesper Meadow, and they're trying to save the Mardon skipper butterfly up there, and they are symbiotic with the native bunch grass that's growing in the meadow, and it's getting smaller and smaller. The Bollander's Phacelia is a good host plant and a really beautiful, sweet little flower. Strawberry and ferns, maybe not a great pollinator plant, but it is great for your landscape and it is native. And there actually is a moth whose caterpillar eats sword fern. So that's pretty much your palette that you can work with. And if you have a pollinator garden or you're thinking about it at some point, I would invite you to get on the Buzzway. This is a project we're doing. We've been doing this with SOU since 2016 or 17, probably 17 or 18. And what we're doing is inviting people to self-certify their pollinator garden. You go onto our website, fill out a form. You can give us a description, and then we can track where the pollinator gardens are so that perhaps a butterfly could go from the monument, which is what this yellow line is here, all the way to Grants Pass, find pollen and nectar, and find the native plants that her babies need so she can lay eggs and populate the valley. It's in theory, it makes sense. There are some butterflies that won't come down to this lower elevation, but there are some that won't because there's nothing for them to eat. This is the fire scar. And so I mentioned the From Fire to Flowers pollinator garden program. So we're helping people build gardens back into that fire scar so we can restore that land. This is our goal, pesticide-free pollinator habitat to create corridors. And this is what the website looks like. And this is what the interactive map looks like in real life. As soon as it loads, there it goes. So you can drill down and you can see, where you are. So let's change the world. Let's change our world. This is a picture of a young person at our fall plant sale last year. And I just thought that was an amazing photo of her face holding that plant that fits. And this is a meme I picked up off of Facebook a couple years ago. So we're going from the left to the right. I want those caterpillars to eat my leaves. Here's some resources that I would recommend. All of these are on our website. If you do want the PDF that I'll be sending to Nicole, you'll be able to click on each one of these blue links here and also throughout the presentation. Like you can see some of those videos that I showed you earlier. There's other books that I would recommend as well. We have some upcoming events. You can find these on our website. Register. We have a plant sale coming up on the 6th. Crowded. We are going to have 4 other vendors other than us. Klamath Native Seeds, Cornucopia Acres out of Grants Pass, Klamath Native Plant Nursery. They will have a special plant. You'll have to come and find it. And then White Oak Farms in Williams. He will be bringing lots of native shrubs, maybe a few trees. And then we'll have a booth for the first time with Sunday afternoons, so you can buy hats to go along with your plants. And then we'll have a table, the Native Plant Society. So this is behind our building. This is the back side of the building. The front side I already showed you. So this is in the parking lot off of 4th Street. We have a couple of other exciting workshops coming up, and then we'll be at these 2 places coming up. And there's some more links. The resource list I already mentioned. You can find out more information about our gardens, although those pictures are so far outdated, but you can see some of the original pictures. If I have a volunteer, maybe someday I'll get those updated. Here's a link to events and classes. Visit our garden. Hopefully you're going to do that. We have a garden guide. You can follow us on social media. We would love to have any donations to support our work. You can also volunteer, get on the Rogue Buzzway. We have e-newsletter, the Pollinator Times. You can get signed up for that. And here's the goal that we're all looking for, to have a butterfly on our finger. And here's my 3 questions. Thank you, Nicole, for suggesting that I add these. So here's your 3 things. Attend the garden tour on Saturday. Invite a friend to visit, meaning walk by gardens in your neighborhood and decide whether or not you would want to live there as a pollinator, and why or why not. And then purchase and plant at least 1 native plant, which could be a tree, a shrub, a flowering orb, a grass. You could do bulbs, but I didn't list those, in your landscape. And then pay attention to it and its pollinators for a whole year. That's my presentation. I would be happy for any questions or comments.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Kristina. And I went through as you were presenting and added in some links to some of the podcasts, Buzzway that you mentioned. So folks, you can check that out in the chat. At this point, you are welcome to unmute yourself if you'd like to ask a question, use the raise your hand feature, or enter question or comment into the chat.
I had a question.
Mhm.
This is Consuelo. In one of the first pictures of the highway, I guess it was, you said, if you look at this, it's mowed grass. I understand the mowed grass issue, but I wasn't sure what is the problem with conifers.
Oh, it isn't really. It's just that there's nothing blooming. I mean, we have
True.
conifers, but there's nothing blooming there that would support pollinators. I mean, there is, and I don't even know if those are native conifers. I mean, I just pulled that picture off the website. I don't know where that came from. So there is, I didn't mean to imply that there was a problem with conifers. There actually is a white pine butterfly. I think I got the common name more or less correct. So the host plant is the white pine that the caterpillar of this butterfly eats. There's not a lot of conifers that support pollinators of anything, whether it's butterflies or bees or whatever, because the pollen of the conifers is mostly wind dispersed, so the conifers don't really need pollinators. There are some other insects that eat conifers. So they are extremely important, but no, I wasn't implying that there was a problem with conifers, but
Yeah.
thanks for asking.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions or comments?
And like I said, I'm happy to provide this PDF. You can look back at it. Anybody else coming to the tour after this presentation?
I have another question.
Sure.
So when planting native plants,
Mhm.
I think people assume that they're like other plants they might get in a nursery that have been raised in a greenhouse and they have been changed over decades, you could
Mhm.
say, and they put them in the ground and then they get disappointed that they don't thrive.
It's a good question.
Yeah, so I actually had a landscaper friend who said she won't plant natives because they don't survive. And
Mhm.
I'm thinking, well, they're native, number
Right.
one. They grow in particular environments in the wild,
Mhm.
and putting them in an environment that they're not used to is expecting an awful lot from that plant.
True. To some
Yeah.
extent, it's
Yes.
true. I can
But-
see that. Go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, so if you're in like, let's say where I live, Talent, and I want a pollinator garden,
Mhm.
how do I take those considerations? What do I do when I'm selecting plants? How can I inform myself so I'm going to be more successful with my garden and not have a lot of money, being spent
down
on
the drain.
plants that are
Yeah.
dying and
Yeah.
composted?
You're asking a really good question. I've had that same experience. Things have changed so much over the decades, over the centuries that we've settled the valley. And there are some areas of the valley, like probably the black sticky up in Central Point is not going to grow a lot of the native plants we've talked about because it's the soil. So you're asking a really good question. And then we're getting, I believe, into the landscape part of the
Yeah.
conversation, which is if you go back, let's see, let me get back to my presentation for a second, because I really did gloss over it because it's a big thing. We did a class, I'm getting there. We did a class at the Medford Library last fall, I think it was. And this is kind of what we talked about. In fact, that's where this particular slide came from that I'm going to show you in a second. Because what you have to, it's so funny. Here we are. Oops, that's not really what I wanted to show you, is it? What we have to do with natives so many times is like help our landscape get back to what it should be or what it could be based on where we are. So if you've got a shady yard that's got a lot of conifers, don't plant Oregon sunshine
Right.
unless you just get lucky. But that's not what this particular workshop, I mean, this particular presentation was about, but it is an extremely important part of the conversation. And I've had it happen. I'll plant a silver lupin in an area where it should be just totally fine. But silver lupin are tricky. And so sometimes it's actually easier to do a seed rather than put a plant in, because I've had silver lupins that bit the dust as well. I've got one now that I'm watching, and I think I managed to get that one going. And once it goes, it's fine. So it really is, it's strange, because you'd think that native plants are all easy, and they're not. Some of them are. Like put in a Idaho gumweed, put in tarweed. I mean, you don't have to do anything, and you're going to after a while go, why do I have so many of these plants? Because they really do great. Poppies are like that. So part of it is also just learning the landscape that you have, and then so looking at where's the one I really wanted? Oh, maybe I actually don't have that. This is the one I was thinking of. So you also want to look at the soil. You want to look at the sun. You want to look at the irrigation. And then think about that. So you're bringing up a good point. So we are planning to do that same class again. I hope it works again in February. And we'll go into more about planning a garden and looking at these particular components. How much shade do you get? Are there lots of roots? Is it on a slope?
Yeah, I think silver lupin has been interesting. I have a 50% success rate with that plant. And and they're planted basically in the same area. So I don't know what really caused 2 of my plants to die and the other 2 to be successful. Goldenrod, I would say I totally get that. I mean, I plant goldenrod. I'm going to have goldenrod forever now.
Yeah.
I planted tobacco and it did okay for 1 year, never came back.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, so I was surprised. But it could be location. And I was trying to choose plants that are that can take full sun, because that's where this land has full sun. But my red currants, they're dying on the branch. So, but that word understory, yeah, they don't have anything protecting them. So,
yeah. So, I mean, I do totally see your point. I have some red currants in my yard, and I'm in Ashland, and it doesn't get much shade. It makes it through and I think the summers have changed a bit. So it does get scorched every summer, and it comes back in the spring. So I think having that understory situation. So in a way, so I guess native plants are probably, I think they're worth doing, but I also think that there's a challenge, and some people aren't up for it. So your friend, she's not going to worry about it. I can see that so many of the plants that we buy in the nurseries have been hybridized over time. They can sit in a pot, root bound, too much water, too little water, and they will survive. It's those plastic plants. So you're getting something in your landscape, but is it really providing what the ecosystem needs? So if everybody did that, then we wouldn't be the Rogue Valley. So I guess one has to decide. So if you come to the tour tomorrow, Consuelo, we had a silver, and then you also have to understand the life cycle of a plant. A silver lupin might live 3 or 4 years, so it's not a long-lived plant.
Yeah.
But you want it to go to seed. So we had a silver lupin live 3 years in our front scape. It's super awesome, and all of a sudden it died. But I have, I believe, 6 babies in that garden from her.
So it's all seeded.
And they go where they want.
Yeah.
And then some of those have made babies. So I got silver lupins growing up sort of almost like weeds.
Well, I am coming to the tour. I'm looking forward to it.
No, you're asking a really, really good question. So the answer is look at where you are. And if it's shade, then you want plants that have more shade. And really, the way the climate is changing, I think the plants like more shade and more water. And that's another thing. I'm going to show you tomorrow a sulfur flower buckwheat. One's been getting shade and water and looks beautiful. And the other one, I think I forgot to put drip on, and it has no shade and it looks eh. So that was the other thing, and I'll talk about this tomorrow. So when we first put the garden in, it was like, well, we're not going to water because these are native plants.
Oh, right. You can't do that.
But then everybody or very little water. We're not going to give it much water. But then it looks like, why would I put this in my garden? So, and I've got a vinegar weed in the garden. It's getting water and it's just like lush, but you wouldn't see that out in the woods in the native plants environment. So as a gardener, you are making decisions. You're deciding you want that plant and not that plant. You are the gardener.
Right.
And so if you want that plant to be healthy, you're probably going to water it more than it would get in the natural landscape.
Right. And I do probably overwater some of my native plants. But one of the things I think that is important, just to throw this out there, is planting some non-native plants also that are going to be flowering at the time that, early, that when, the honeybees are going to come, they're aggressive pollinators, and then when you have your native bees that are coming out, later, and there's nothing there for them to eat because the honeybees have attacked everything. I think, having non-native flowering plants might be one approach to being able to tackle that issue.
Maybe
I don't know
so.
what you think
I
about
think
that.
so. Yeah. I mean, I have lavender in my garden. I have some other non-natives, which I can't think of at the minute. So I think that in this day and age, for someone to have a completely 100% native garden is a great goal. I think it would be hard to do. We do have native plants that bloom really early, but then they may not be showy and you may not even see them because it's cold, so you don't even go out. And then the Grindelianana, the Idaho gumweed that I mentioned, I mean, I know that was December when I took that photo, but that was in Phoenix. But then there's not going to be many bees out in December anyway. So yeah, it's a balance. And I think the goldenrod and the aster, which used to be pretty good for longer into the fall, they're blooming earlier. So it's things are changing.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Kristina, there are quite a few folks that are excited to join you on Saturday. You mentioned tomorrow a couple times, but
sorry.
I know you meant Saturday, so
I meant Saturday.
In the chat. You're just so excited for it.
I was thinking today was Friday, so
and then there was a question from Mary on what are good pollinators for shady yards. I wonder if she means pollinator plants.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, they aren't necessarily as showy in the shady areas. I would think Western Columbine, which is a good spring, early summer plant. It's really pretty. It's a perennial, I believe, and it will seed but nicely. I love the heuchera, the coral bells, and the hybrids have pink flowers, and I think the native heuchera are just gorgeous because when they bloom, it looks almost like fairy dust up above. They love shade and water, and more water. Ferns, of course, are great. Asters like shade, some shade. They like sun, but they like late day shade. I'm sure I'm missing some things, but those are things that come to mind for the more shady areas. And then some of the shrubs like the 9-bark, that's a shrub, it's a big shrub. That's a really great plant for late day shade. Anybody else have ideas? Jump in. These are just off the top of my head.
How about bleeding heart?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. I've had trouble with bleeding heart at the garden in Phoenix, that something eats it. But yes, both of those are good.
Some creeping Oregon grape.
Although they will take sun, but yes, Oregon grape would be great. Definitely. That's a really good plant. It's very ubiquitous, but it's a very good spring blooming plant, again, for the pollen and the nectar for the bees that are just coming out and needing something to eat. And the berries, I'm assuming the birds eat the berries. So yeah, so for those of you coming tomorrow, I'll just forewarn you, it does not look like it did in the picture with all the poppies. All that's pretty much gone. There are some things that are still blooming. And yeah, I'm excited to have you there. It's for 2 hours from 12 to 2. And we'll just start on one side and go to the other, and then we'll go around and look at the nursery so you can see where we're growing plants, and go inside and you can see some of the materials we have available.
And the weather looks fairly mild at a high of 79, 80. So
Awesome. Bring a hat. It's always nice to have a hat.
it's a lot better than 100.
Yeah, that would be difficult. So actually, I should say that for those of you that are coming tomorrow, there's not a lot of parking. We are in Suite B, which is in the middle. There's a cheese cave on the one side in Suite A, and then I doubt Firebrand will be there in Suite C tomorrow. So parking in the front will be limited and not preferred because B Suite Blooms is also in Suite B. We share the space. And so if you can park in the back off of 4th Street, I probably should have put that in the directions, I just realized. So park in the back off of 4th Street. If you remember what the plant sale picture looks like, there's one driveway that goes in, and then just park pretty much anywhere back there, and then I'll be looking for you. We're in Suite B. You can come in the back door, the middle door, or you can come around front, whichever. Just to keep more of the parking available for the stores.
Are you a fairly easy walk from the Foodery? Because there's that
Oh yeah,
good sized parking lot behind the Foodery, and then folks can get a snack afterward.
it's a good idea. Oh yeah, we're very close to the Foodery, not even a problem. So we're north of the Foodery. Yeah, so if you park around the Foodery, then you're going to be walking against traffic towards us, but that would be an easy thing to do too.
Wonderful. Are
Cool.
there any other questions?
I just want to say thank you so much, everyone, for sticking through the presentation, and I hope you learned some things. And you don't have my email address specifically. I never put that on there, but if you want that, it's Kristina@pollinatorprojectroguevalley.org, or pollinator@pollinatorprojectroguevalley.org. And hopefully I'll see you tomorrow.
Would you like me to share your email with our follow-up
Sure.
email to folks?
Sure, that'd be fine.
Wonderful. You're getting quite a few thank yous in the chat as well.
Oh, good. Well, thank you so much. Thanks for the opportunity.
So helpful and inspiring. Thank you. It was a wonderful presentation. Excited to see you Saturday. What a great presentation. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Thank you very much. See you later.
Okay. Thank you, Kristina.
Bye.
Have a great evening.
You too.